All right. Hi. So that song we were just listening to, if you were listening, there's a there's a trend on Instagram that it's like best friends, but one of them is in love with the other one. And so the whole trend is they set up the camera and then they play the song and like the friend tries to kiss the other friend to see if it's reciprocal or not. Sometimes they kiss and then they're like, oh, they're in love. And sometimes the other person's like, what are you doing? Sometimes you got to take a chance. But I like the song because it's all about moving out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. And I'm sorry that I'm eating ice cream because Francisco's like, what? This is called this is called impulsive eating, comfort food. I was preparing a little bit in the class and I realized I needed something to eat and I didn't have time to make a smoothie, so I'm eating ice cream. So welcome to class via the introduction here. Please turn on your cameras. Don't be afraid. Today's going to be an easier class. Um, so we said in the ACI class, if you were there, we asked this question a long time ago when we started the emptiness chapter. And we asked the question of why did Pabonka Rinpoche say that it's easier to understand the emptiness as it relates to people, the lack of self nature to people, kansak, right? Or why is that easier than it is to understand the emptiness to things, right? Ch, right? And so we got that answer today, finally, in in the ACI course. And I've been waiting to share it because I wanted you all to think about it for a while, right? And so, and the main thing is, and this is where and this is where it's been a little probably not very clear. And I think it might be helpful to clarify a bit. Like, so when we're talking about the self, right? Let me see if I can find the word duck. See if I can find an example of it. Of course, I'm looking for it, can't find it. Or why don't I just type it in? That would be easier. Where's the projection? Which one's projection? This one. Okay. Right. The word duck. Oops. Right. This is the word that we use for self. Right. And we keep saying, like, the self that is not there, right? Establish the self that's not there. Like, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that when we say, the self, the self of the thing, like you know, does that object, that thing exist from its own side? And that's the big question. Like, we use this word self frequently, but it also can describe, it's like it's the thing that's there that you thought is there that's not there, right? Yeah, sure. Doc means me. Doc means I. but it can mean just the general self nature of something, right? And so, like, there's various philosophical words for these. Like, you could say the beingness of something or something like that. Because I went through, I studied quite heavily continental philosophy in undergrad and graduate school, mainly European philosophy as it relates to phenomenology and ontology and all of these things, which mainly is the study of how does something become something. I was fascinated by it. Duh. Like, now it makes sense. Like, I was trying to figure out, like, and trying to figure out, like, how does a being become a being? Like, how does something become something? Like, when somebody looks at themselves in the mirror, like, how do they become themselves? Like, and the questions are always, then there's these whole layers of questions, like, culturally, historically, sociologically, economically, like all of those, all these kind of things, like, what are the stories that come up when you look at yourself in the mirror or you think of me, and how those layers interact with each other and what comes up automatically, what comes up innately, right? And this is why I was so fascinated with studying cultures and studying languages and traveling, and, like, when you meet someone new, the way that they see themselves, like, you know when you go to different countries, like, how does that person become themselves? What stories do they, like, what cultural, there was all these, we can get into the rhetoric of it, I don't want to go too deep into it, but all these questions of how different aspects of culture play out in the definition of a self. Like, I was particularly interested at the time in Latin America, and specifically relations, like cultural relationships between countries, and how people became themselves and how they define themselves. Like, did they define themselves with relationship to themselves, or did they just define themselves with relationship to others? Some cultures are more ethnocentric about themselves, are very xenophobic in some way. Like, we are ourselves. And there's other cultures that are like, they define themselves based on comparison to other cultures in other countries, right? And so, and then they come in different strengths and all these things. And but the fundamental question is, how do they become themselves, right? And this is why I love working with ACI. I love working with such an international organization, because, I mean, just look at the only people who have their cameras on. Losers. We have a Russian, we have a Ukrainian, we have another Russian, another Ukrainian, we have a Vietnamese, we have a Mexican, we have a Taiwanese, we have another Mexican, we have Laura. I don't know where you're actually from, but I know you live in Spain. Are you from Spain? Okay, okay, okay. So Laura's from Spain, right? You know, we have a Canadian, right? We have a, who's the Argentinian? Francisco, are you the Argentinian? Pachi's not here, is he? No, I was talking about who's here, right? You see, so all of a sudden we have all these different people from all these different places, and it's amazing that we can even understand each other. We have a Romanian here. Who don't have their camera on, but I won't be too tough on you, right? But it's like, how do we understand each other? Like, we look the same, mainly. We have two eyes and two ears and a smile and some hair. Some of us have more hair than others, and Some of us are skinnier, some of us are larger, some of us are like shorter, some of us are taller. Some of us have lighter skin, some of us have dark skin. Like, when I look at you, I assume you're like me, right? And then you have one conversation and all of a sudden like you don't understand each other at all. Like you use the same words, but then you don't understand what each other means, right? And then all those things kind of get, oh, nice. We have another exerciser. Nice, Laura. Yeah, she's doing her steps, right? So, but when we say the word self, like what is the self, right? And then when we say like the self of, the self of a chair, like the beingness of a chair, like is it there by itself, self-existently, right? And I've always been fascinated by this, and this is where Buddhism shines, is that it analyzes all of the different methodologies. I went through, as I said, I went through some of the continental philosophy recently, and I was like, oh, Buddhism already did this. Take away all the flowery language and like analyze it. Buddhism already did all of this, right? And then someone goes, oh, it's so new. Like, yes, Martin Heidegger was an amazing philosopher. Merleau-Ponty was an amazing philosopher, right? Described a lot of cool things. You know, Jean-Paul Sartre, right? One of my favorite French guys, right? They're all, you know, but when you look at them at the essence of it, Buddhism's already done most of it, all of it, and described all of it. That's why we have Siddhanta. Like it's all been described already. And so what we're trying to determine is like beyond all of these differences that we have, right? Language differences, right? And even if we all speak English, I worry most of the time I'm not understood. I worry about that with native speakers, let alone non-native speakers. Because even understanding the words, the ideas behind those words are different. you know, and then that's what makes our differences beautiful. And that's what makes conflict fun if you enjoy conflict. Enjoy the conflict a little bit. Like, oh, that didn't land the way I expected it to. But you see, like, but underneath all of it, what we're trying to get to are how is it that we're all the same? How is it that we're all trying to find, what is that sense of self, that duck, that sense of self, that me that gets in the way of all of this? Right. And we all have it. And that's why we all can recognize each other, actually, I think. Sure, we might misunderstand each other. We might have different expectations. We might want certain things, or we want it to be a certain way, or we want to be treated in a certain way, or we're not, and blah, 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 blah. Right. Hopes and dreams and disappointments. But underneath of it, there's a similarity that we all have. And that's why we can recognize each other. You can recognize, when someone is themselves because you can see it in animals too. Like they recognize themselves. They know, and so we're trying to get to that self. We're trying to get to that, identify what is that thing that is beyond all of these layers, right? All of these cultural, demographic, like things that make us unique, right? You are uniquely you, but not really. Your suffering is unique to you, but not really, right? You're not alone in it because everyone else is doing the same dang thing. And then we get stuck in ourselves and think we're the only one, which is the sickness of the duck, right? It's the sickness of the self, the one that thinks that you're the only one. I'm the only one that has to suffer. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry. This is what I say to myself. Like, I'm not saying it to you, not poor you, poor Tim. Like, you know, talk to yourself and say, am I really the only one that has to suffer? So, but how is, and this is what I was saying earlier in the other classes, this is what's so beautiful about the worldview that's being presented here. It outlines for us and shows us this is who we are. And these are the things that we do that either bring people together and create community and happiness and in general overall goodness, or these are the things we do that create separation, destruction, pain, you know, all of those things. And it all comes down to just a misunderstanding of who we are. And people will hurt other people to get those things and treat other people like they don't have a self. And it's a little, it can be scary at times. So, but how are we the same? And this is what the Buddhist teachings were so powerful at, is distilling all the I don't want to call it garbage because that's not fair, but all the layers, right? To get to our naked self, right? This is why you should make sure that I stay up all night, because then I'll just say whatever's on my mind. I have no filter. Like, this is why a nudist beach is amazing. Like, everyone just takes off their clothes and you're just like, oh, we're just human beings without clothes. Like, there's nothing sexual about a nudist beach. I mean, when you're younger, you might like not be comfortable, but like at a certain point, like everyone's body is just being bodies, right? And we put all these like things on top to be like, oh, I'm protecting myself. Yeah, shut up. You're still a bag of flesh, right? And the understand that we're all the same. Like, it's like going somewhere where people don't have hierarchy, where there isn't like indicators of class or how much money you have or origin or all of those things, right? Like, then we're just really all the same, because all those people that you aspire to, all those people that you admire and you aspire to be like all those influencers. I have an influencer who's trying to make me an influencer. She's like, pay me so you can be an influencer. I'm like, great. Anastasia, I'll send you the information. You can figure it out if you want. I'll have someone else make me an influencer, I guess. Actually, Geshe Michael told me not to be an influencer on Instagram. I'm like, all right, fine. But take away all of the things, right? If you took all the people right? Okay. I'm going to admit something. Here we are. So, again, been up since 2:30. Like it was a deep realization I had. I was at the gym that I went to in Philadelphia was downtown Philadelphia, and it was the high end gym. It was actually in the building where I worked. We got a discount, but all the local politicians went there. Okay, including the governor of the state. I'm not going to say who it was, but right. And I was in the locker room, and there's like this big I don't know, I can't remember if it was the sauna. It was the steam room or a sauna, right? And there's like 10 guys sitting in there, right? And I'm just hanging out after work. I'm like, oh, work sucked today. Just oh my God. There's a big ass spider up there. Oh my God. Huge. All right, we'll take care of that later. Um, it's scary. It's cute, I guess. But yeah, so I'm sitting there, and then the governor of my state, who used to be the mayor of the city I was in, was there sitting there just like I was being polite. I had my towel on. He was just being himself, right? 70-year-old guy hanging out in the locker room, you know, and then just chatting with everybody, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting next to the governor. And I was like looking at him, and I was like, oh my God, he's just a normal human being. Like 7 years old, clearly like he hadn't been exercising for quite a while, I'll tell you that. Right. you know, and he was talking to some other guy, and they were just talking about like football. I mean, it was banal conversation. And I was just like, in our nakedness, we're all the same. Like, sure, he's famous and makes a lot of money and runs the state and blah 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 blah. Right. But it was like I wanted to like introduce myself and say, hey, I'm da 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 da. And I was like, for what reason? Right. It's just a normal person. Like he just happens to have this role. But in our sheer nakedness, like just just everybody's a human being. He's going to get old and he's going to die. He's unhealthy, overweight, governor, and he kind of smelled bad. Okay. But at the end of the day, like he was sitting next to me, it was disgusting. The point is take a shower before you go into the sauna, and that's why they make you take a shower. Anyway, the point is that underneath it all, we're all the same, and what we're trying to understand is how we are the same. And rich, poor, white, black, Asian, red, whatever color you are, right? Blue eyed, brown eyed, green eyes, black eyes, brown hair, blonde hair, white hair, no hair, right? Red hair, you know, at the end of the day, it's all the same. And so, what we're trying to do is understand what is it that makes us us so then we can stop being that. And what I mean by that is, how do we become ourselves so that we can discover a power to change ourselves? That so maybe we don't have to be a 75-year-old unhealthy governor hanging out in the steam room, worried about death, where we could potentially, do something about it, and maybe we don't have to arrive at a point where we have to die, because that's what tantra teaches us. It teaches us that we can do this in one life. We don't need to go through lifetime after lifetime over and over again. You know, if we can understand how we become ourselves, then maybe we could do something different, right? That's the duck. That's what we're trying to deny, the self that comes up. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a meditation. Okay, we're going to do a meditation so you can learn how to catch yourself in the self. And it's a relatively simple meditation, but if you do this over and over again, you may be able to find a when you're having a moment where you're so into what's going on for yourself, but then you don't pay attention to what's actually happening. All right, cool. Let's get ready to meditate. All right. Soften your eyes and then come to your breath. And you always should start a meditation by purifying and collecting some good karma, purifying bad karma and then collecting good karma. So we'll invite someone that you admire. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It can be, but it could be just someone. I like to think about the people around me. Sometimes I think of different people on the ACI staff. They work so hard. And so I choose one. And I think about their good qualities. What cool things about that person do you really admire? Like, what about them is really neat? Like their kindness, their softness, their willingness to help. And then taking a moment to make an offering to them. And I not necessarily thinking of as an offering, but if they are in your world and you see that good quality, like you want to thank them for it. Like, thank you for being so awesome. So you can give them something, you can just tell them how amazing they are. You can tell them how they inspire you. Just give them some kind of gratitude for their awesomeness. And then tell them one thing that you're still working on. Maybe in the last day or so, you maybe didn't, you weren't so kind to somebody else. And just let them know, admit it. And then let them know something great that you did, some kindness, some way that you help somebody else. And then ask them to continue being a good example. Sometimes we say request teachings, but really you're asking them just to continue being a good person, to be an example for you to become better. And then ask them to stay a long time. Ask them to live a long life. Wish that they stay. And then you can see them either dissolve into your heart, or they can maybe come sit next to you. And now we're going to do a bit of a review meditation, a review of our something that happened to us in the past. So without getting emotional yet or having any reaction, choose somebody in your past who accused you of something untrue. For me, it's easy to think of several people, and like a parent is a good one because parents not are not necessarily trying to accuse you, but as a child you're misunderstood. Sometimes this can happen with partners or teachers, people you admire. And think of a time where they said something about you that wasn't true. Like my mom used to say that I'm a procrastinator. And I used to believe that I was like, that's not true. So go through what something that somebody said to you or you heard someone else say about you that just wasn't true. And then review the feeling that arose in that moment when you first heard the lie or the accusation or the thing that was just not true or didn't include all the information. Maybe it was partially true, but didn't have enough information. Notice all the feelings that come up. What did you say, even if you only spoke in your mind? What did it feel like to be falsely accused? How does it feel to be you? Who is the you that is falsely accused? We're not analyzing it right now. We're just feeling the me that says that's not true. That's not me. That me that declares that's not me. That self that stands up for itself and declares that's not me. That's the self that we are going to investigate, analyze, deny. Let's do another example. Think about a time when you were really sick. Maybe you had a fever or a flu, COVID. You're laying in bed. What feelings did you have? Like, I'm sick. I can't move. the you that feels sick. And now try to remember one time when you got surprisingly good news. Like maybe your partner proposed marriage, or you found out you were having a child, or you got your dream job. The me that's happy right now, surprised, overwhelms everything else. This is the self we're looking for. This is the me we're looking for. And being able to identify when you feel that, that's the gotcha. That's the self we deny. That's the one that's not there on its own, self standing. That one is not in control. And that's just a self that's being projected onto certain indicators to create the image of the self. It doesn't make it any less real. Of course, it's there. But how it's there is what we're going to learn how to deny, how to dissolve. Because each of those situations came with a certain emotion, a certain feeling. But that feeling was not inherent in the situation. A whole other emotions could have come up in the same moment. You were falsely accused, but you were like, oh, okay. Or that when that happiness surprise thing happened, did it have to have that reaction? And who are you that's being put onto all of that? Does it have to be you? And come back to your breath. Take 3 long exhales. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. All right, let's do 2 lines here to clarify this. All right. Anastasia, can you read this first line here?
Eni perna na sorry. I need to come back. Lamdu mi shine trowana. Miksurgi troktan lamni kat sorry. Karchane trowa talon chihlanke ki novo ne.
Nene, yes. Okay. So another example that we're going to use here of what this means. So there's 2 people walking down a path. All right. And so 2 people walking side by side down a path, down a road. All right. So when you're walking side by side with somebody, right, and you're like, you need to keep an eye on, 2 things. You need to keep an eye on both your friend and the road. So if you're walking side by side, you have your friend and you have the road. So you're kind of paying attention to both things at the same time. Okay. So the main part of our mind needs to stay aware of itself. Okay. While at the same time engaging in conventional appearances. All right. So the main mind needs to be aware of itself, meaning like when you're walking down the street, just sort of doing ordinary things, you're not thinking about me, right? You're not thinking about the self. You're just doing things. But when you have these moments of like extreme being accused or being sick or extreme happiness, you flip into this moment of me, the innate self. You flip into it and be like, hey, I'm me. I'm sick. I'm wrongly accused. I'm surprisingly happy right now that I got into my college of choice. Or, oh my God, my partner is proposing to me like that. If you've ever been proposed to and you were surprised and you enjoyed it, there's a whole bunch of things that could go wrong, right? That moment where you go, oh my God, me, like that's that feeling. And so what we need to learn to do is not toggle. Well, I mean, technically you're going to be, but you want to be doing both of those things. You want to be aware of the general surrounding, but also be aware that there's a me involved. All right. And so next line, Laura, you're up on the docket here.
Gotcha. Sangwa char du chukla loi cha sheptra mo shiki langke ki nak nang nang
Mhm.
tsula tak prakto pratko.
Nice. Talk good. Wow. All of a sudden your reading is amazing. What happened? This is what happens. Sit in class. You just listen and things happen. Good job. So I forget one of these words. I did this. Okay. So this word chuk can mean to interfere, to allow, to get involved with. Okay. So getting involved in the way that the gakcha arises and appears to the self. Okay. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get involved with, or not just blindly living a life, but getting involved with how that self appears to the self, the thing we're going to deny, right? Getting involved with that. To do so, we must examine the way that it appears innately, and we need to do it with a subtle part of the mind. Chashe Lui. Okay. So, what we need to figure out is to be able to become aware of the self, not just oh my God, I got into Harvard. Okay, I didn't get into Harvard, but pretend, right? I got into Harvard, right? Oh my God, they accepted me, right? It's not just the feeling of the I, that the me, right? But it's the subtle part of the mind that recognizes that that's the me that's arising. So it's kind of like Sheishin, right? And it's like a skill in meditation that you have when you try to learn, you try to detect when you're off the object and to bring yourself back to the object. So basically, when you're not recognizing the I that needs to be denied, you need your Sheishin to bring it back. You need a subtle part of the mind to bring that back to say, hey, that's me. That's the self that's not there, buddy. Congratulations, you got into Harvard. but you didn't get into Harvard. Your seeds opened up that for you and the phone call to come to say you got into Harvard. Seeds opened up to have your partner get on one knee and be like, let's get married. Right. And so you have that other part of your mind who's kind of watching, detecting when the innate self arises. And so that's our goal right now. We're going to learn how to analyze it later, but that's our goal. Our goal is to be able to detect that self. Right? Just turn on the detector. We're not going to deny it yet. We're not. I mean, that's why we have another year or so of translation to figure out how to deny it. Yay! So exciting. But the main part will be can we catch ourselves and move out of a kind of blindness, right? So it's not just having the emotional reaction. I can't believe you accused me of this thing. Oh, yes, you did accuse me of that thing. Great. Right. Or someone proposed to you, or like you finally got that hot date, whatever. Right. But it's about detecting when the innate self, that mistaken view of the self, comes up. So we're turning on our detectors. And that's today's lesson. And I thought it was worthwhile to not push so far in the translation, but to spend time learning how to detect it. Right. And you're going to forget about it in 5 minutes. Don't worry. But next time someone gets upset with you, you can, next time you get upset with somebody else or something cool happens, try to turn on the detector. And then we'll talk about how to unwind that over the next 6 months or something like that. I think what we're going to do with these classes, by the way, since things are going to change, we might just change this to once a week, kind of ongoing. So it's just going to be a day that we can say, hey, we're just going to do some LAMRIM today for an hour. And it actually will make it easier for me too, because then I'll be in a constant translation mode instead of like having to do so much in such a short period of time. And we can just kind of maybe go through it a little bit faster. And I asked Geshe the other day a question because I didn't know what was going on, and he was like, he seemed to forget that I told him I was doing this and that he said it was okay to do it, and that he seemed to forget. So he was pleasantly surprised that we're doing this. You know, go figure. Teachers that don't remember what you say to them. I don't know why I have to see that. Bye. Have a great day. Thanks for coming. And say goodbye to each other. And we'll see you on Monday.
Thank you so much for profound meditation. It was a wonderful class. See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Muchísimas
Thank you,
gracias.
Tingla.
Gracias.
Spasibo, Baka.
Thank you so much.
Mulțumim.
Oh, tukje.
See, are you going to Sarah? Though, sorry, I'm sorry. What did you just catch the I in that emotional moment? I'm not going. Oh man.
More seeds to figure it out.
Okay.
But I'm going to Harvard instead.
Oh, all right. Well, okay.
I'm kidding.
That's it's not the same. Okay. All right. Bye.